Hi, and welcome to Conservative Voices Talking Points. And I'd like to introduce our panel, Gentry Collins, Eric Branstad, and Rob Mudd. Gentlemen, once again, thank you for joining us. Let's jump right into it. We've got a Biden administration that appears to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, but appears to be failing on all fronts. There was a press conference a couple weeks back now, where President Biden appeared before reporters and the nation, frankly, for a couple of hours. And during that press conference, he claimed to have exceeded expectations. Gentry, let's start with you.
Well, President Biden has exceeded my expectations for sure. You know, he has made a Republican majority in the House vastly more likely, much more quickly than I had any right to expect. And, you know, I think if that's what he meant, then I will agree with the president. He has exceeded expectations.
All right.
And I'm scared for the safety of our country right now, to be completely honest, with, I think, his lack of strength in relation to Russia and Ukraine, the potential allies between Russia and China. I think this is all really, really scary, and our headlines could completely change in a matter of minutes if something moves forward with Russia going after Ukraine. And I think I'm really concerned.
Yeah, we've got countries like Ukraine and Taiwan, kind of in the crosshairs of I don't want to call them enemies, but they would certainly be their enemies if they were invaded. Rob?
They're in the crossroads of Biden's ineptness, right? The leaders on the world stage, see weakness in Biden. And these guys have a strategy to defeat us. So I think Eric's absolutely right. I think they're going to make a fool out of us first, which they're doing economically, and put us in a triangulation. But it's dangerous, and they're taking advantage of his ineptness. There's no other way to describe it, and at the level that you can't really have room for mistakes.
But so, I don't know why that ineptitude should be a surprise to any Biden voter, right? It was an Obama administration senior official who I believe said during the Obama presidency that Joe Biden has never been on the right side of a foreign policy issue. You know, and so then we made him president.
So this go around shows the biggest contrast from how to govern, right? Than ever before. And maybe we needed to see it because they're not anything alike, nothing alike. And the results are completely different too. One went this way, one went that way. So I hope the Republicans, when it comes time to vote and get out there and
hope they show up at the polls, right?
Yeah, right. When you vote, right? Yeah. Show up. Yeah. And then remember what you ran on and remember what happened and not try to create something all new out of the nothing when we've got plenty of material on what does work and what doesn't work. Let's keep going forward and be real Republicans. Yeah. The Lynn Cheneys need to go.
Yeah. The sticking with foreign policy, if you will, we still have a border crisis going on. Now, it's kind of, it hasn't died off, but in the media it's kind of died off because we have so many other things going on, right? It's not the hot topic of the moment, but we still have a flood of illegal immigrants crossing our southern border. And I know Kamala Harris was put in charge of the border, but has anybody seen anything being done on that front?
Nobody's seen anything being done because nothing has been done, nothing is being done, nothing will be done until there's a change in administration. I think this is one of those many ways that President Biden has exceeded my partisan expectations. Mm-hmm. He has exceeded them in the sense that he has made so crystal clear what little regard he has for the will of the American people very rapidly and very consistently throughout his term. I think this is one of those defining issues, and I think one of the reasons that one of the reasons there's so much confidence there will be a Republican majority, at least in the House, is precisely because the country has made up its mind on this. You know, if the president were interested in what the American people thought, you would probably have seen it first at the border, right? It was the first clear, out of control, Biden policy-driven crisis. And what has he done about it? Absolutely nothing. You know, and by the way, he's already had some political warning shots. right? They lost in Virginia. They lost school board elections around the country this past November. They nearly lost in New Jersey, right? One of the bluest states in the country, right? A state they hadn't lost since President Obama's disaster back in 2009, right? So they know what's coming, and yet they refuse to do anything about it. So he's again, I say, he's right. He's exceeded my political expectations. He's giving us a political gift, but unfortunately the country has to pay for that.
Country suffering.
His judgment it's wrong all the time, right? So we've put a guy in office who can lead the globe, or at least the U.S., and his judgment is like 180 from the right way to do it on every single thing, right? Go back to when he's 49 years old all the way through. Who said it? He's always on the wrong side of national policy or foreign policy. Always, always, always. And he's still doing it. So either he's really, I don't want to say dumb, because I don't think he's a dumb man, but he really believes in what he's professing, or his judgment. It's wrong. It's absolutely stone cold wrong, and it ain't gonna work. So whatever he has planned, it won't work. But the pain that we have to endure to make the change, hopefully won't last longer, but then we'll remember and not get short memories on we got outplayed. Yeah.
If I was an immigrant south of the border, obviously during the previous administration, I would have not felt welcome.
Right.
An illegal immigrant.
An illegal. Yeah. And my plan was to cross illegally. Now they've heard, and they've gotten a welcome mat ever since. And I think what we're going to see in the United States, what President Trump really pointed out during the campaign in 2016, when this was one of his major focuses, was he was pointing out all of these bad guys that are coming in and being let loose into our cities. These bad guys are doing bad things, and those things will start to add up. And America is going to see that, and is going to see what this kind of, what this welcome mat of illegals is doing to the country, and doing to it's going to trickle down to our own communities, and we're going to see the problems that those kind of decisions.
And Trump said we would see that. I mean, he said that.
Yeah.
So let's segue that into another, let's call it a failure, a crime epidemic. And it could be attributed somewhat to illegals coming in and going into a city and continuing to do illegal activity, but also American citizens that just are feeling like they can go into downtown Chicago and break into a jewelry store, or
they can, as long as they don't take anything over $750.
Yeah,
they can.
If you're in San Francisco, if it doesn't go above, what is it,
$900, I think.
Then the police say, well, we'll take a note and we'll get to it. But crime is crime has been an issue for a while, but the increase in crime has been drastic, especially in some cities like Washington, D.C., like Chicago, like Philadelphia. I saw something like a 400%, and please don't quote me if I'm off by a few percentages, but a huge increase in murder rate in our third or fourth largest city. Crime has become an issue, and yet, you tell me, am I seeing any kind of distancing from that, from the current administration, or is it just let's avoid it?
I got a question for all you guys. When you first start to do something, what do you have to do to get good at it? Practice. We're indoctrinating a new group of young people to practice, right? And become more emboldened to create bigger crimes because they got away with the little crimes, and they think they can get away with all the crimes. This is Obama's JV. We are empowering the JV to learn how to be truly damn good criminals by practice. That's how I see it. Sorry.
I think I'll share two thoughts with you. One, what I've heard from the Biden administration is blaming the guns. Right? Mm-hmm. The guns don't commit crimes. And so I think the American people understand that. Even those that favor tighter gun regulations in the country, that's not going to pass muster. The second thing I would say is, here we sit in early February. We're in the midst of Black History Month. We just celebrated Martin Luther King Day. a great Republican, I might add, historically speaking. And, you know, he had some things right. King did. Mm-hmm. He said, we ought to judge people by the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. He didn't say we shouldn't judge actions that violate the law. He said we ought to judge you by the content of your character, not the color of your skin. And I think what you're seeing in policing decisions in a lot of these major cities where you're talking about these crime increases is that they are judging people by the color of their skin. And, you know, depending on the color of your skin, we'll apply the law or we won't apply the law. King had it right. Let's judge you on the content of your character, not on the color of your skin, period. I think if we honored King's real legacy, the country might be in better shape today.
I think you're right. Let's talk about another tough front for the Biden administration. The blame's being shifted, but let's talk inflation. We're seeing it at home, aren't we, Eric?
I was at Walmart. I have made the same egg bake for my family for 10 years.
I want some of
And
that.
I use the Jimmy Dean sausage in the roll, and I buy it usually at the Walmart that is close to our house and the grocery there. And I noticed when I was there this last Sunday preparing brunch, it's well over double the price. I used to buy it at $2.50. It was $6, $7, $8, something like that. It was ridiculous. I would have usually bought 3 and frozen some, but I didn't want to spend the $20 on the 3 tubes of the little, 1 pound Jimmy Dean sausages, so I only bought 1. But I've never really thought, I never would have even thought to not do that ever before. But that's, and it's, gasoline paying, $55 to fill up my daughter's car instead of the $35 it was not that long ago, last year.
That's a fatherly's love.
Right, yeah. I mean, it's adding up and it's adding up, and it's really starting to affect everyone's daily lives, including myself, and I didn't think that would happen.
Right. And so there's a lot of discussion about inflation. Where does it come from? Who's at fault? What can be done about it? As in most cases in politics, blame is being placed and shifted and whatnot. But Gentry, are we looking at this being a policy matter?
It is absolutely a policy matter. It's a policy matter when we get to the supply chain issues that I'm sure we want to talk about. But before you even get to the supply chain issues, the number one driver of inflation is more money, is a faster increase in the supply of money than in productivity, okay? And that's consumed by whom? The federal government. So the federal government has a printing press. The federal government has a huge appetite to spend money that we don't have. The federal government doesn't have the appetite, thank God, to increase taxes. And so what happens, they print. There's more money in the system, and that money all of a sudden is cheapened, right? We're not getting more productive. They're printing too much money. They've been doing it for way too long. And the number one culprit is absolutely policy. It's federal spending that we cannot afford. Okay, that's always been the case through all time. In every case that you ever see inflation that's based on money that the government prints, right? I mean, the exceptions would be, when we find new deposits of gold and so forth. But of course, we haven't been on a gold standard since 1972 or something. Okay, so in every case you can find historically, the number one driver is not some weird distortion in the marketplace. It's too much money supply with too little productivity gain, and that money is consumed by federal spending. So it is not partially a policy problem. It is absolutely a policy problem, and it is the fault of this president and his cronies in Congress.
They created the pandemic so people could stay home and they could send them money, and that's what they did. It's exactly what they did. It was their plan to do it. And that's what they did. And this is what happens when they lay their plans and execute their plans. They're to trick us. And so we're got to live through it until it gets changed. And hopefully our memories will be longer than they have been in the past.
So there's a few different terms being flung around about inflation, right? Long-term inflation, there's other things. I'm not an economist, but you hear from the podium, whether it's Jen Psaki or somebody else from the administration talking, they say they have plans to drive inflation down. Yet I'm a layperson. So the layperson looks at their plans. Their plans are, to your point, spend more money. Take it with a grain of salt. If I have a certain income in my household and we spend X, there's a gap there and I can't afford something, so I don't buy those things. I don't go out and spend money I don't have. Why is it we feel the liberty in our country, or maybe just certain people within our country, to spend what we don't have? Is it something that, here's the question, is it something that they weren't taught as a child, so you go up believing that money's free or things?
No, they were taught.
You deserve it?
They were taught. They're really good at what they're taught. They know it so well, better than we do. And they know how to trap us, right? Because we are a debtor nation. Credit cards moves the needle, right? So they can get away with deficit spending because everybody else does it too, until they take you way too far. And then you become lost in the sea of interest and lockdown, controlled, right? And you can't get out because the interest, it's on purpose. Just like Clyburn said, hey, I'll get you elected. And he did. And this is what was the pay to play, was put the rest of the country in a position that it flounders, and they think they got to put money in the system, and they do it, and it makes it worse. And then they try to sneak in a bill that federalizes elections and run it for the rest of our lives. And that was their plan.
I've got a question for you guys. Maybe somebody knows this, and hopefully, if not, maybe one of our viewers can help us out. But when's the last time that the federal government spent at or under a budget amount? In other words, didn't have to raise the debt ceiling.
Clinton, wasn't it? Clinton last time balanced budget?
No, Gingrich dragging Clinton along.
Right.
When Clinton had a Democratic majority, he managed it as poorly as Biden and as poorly as Obama. That's what gave us we called it the Republican Revolution.
Yep.
Remember, the contract with America.
Yep.
So it was not Clinton. It was Clinton, brought dragging and screaming because he was afraid he was going to lose in 1996. It was Newt Gingrich and Republicans in the Congress that balanced the budget. They balanced it on paper, though. And God bless them, they came as close as anybody ever did. But it was balanced using some gimmicks and out years, right? That was a hell of a lot better than where we're at today, but it has been a very long time since we've had a truly balanced budget.
So we'll talk about upcoming races in another topic, but Eric, is inflation going to be one of the hot button topics for 2022 midterms?
It absolutely is. I mean, like I described, it's the bread and butter issues. And it's always economy. It's jobs. It is folks being able to support their families, pay the heating bills, all of these things. After this winter, I think we're really seeing and we're really feeling the crunch on the inflation. And I noticed it too, going out to eat this last weekend with my wife. Something that is usually $11.99 is $18.99. I mean, it's this way, and really, I'm watching much more than I've ever watched, and fortunately, I haven't had the need to really watch every single dollar and every single cent that my family spends, but I do right now.
Well, a lot of people have to.
And I mean, I've got 3 cars and a big home and lots of kids and lots of pets. Everything has added up times 6 for my family. Times 10 if you include the pets. It goes, which you have to.
Right,
they're part of the family.
Right.
So it's costing a lot more, and everything is costing a lot more. So we can't do as much, and it is unfortunate, and it's not that I work any less.
And look, you don't have to be a guy that's run a lot of campaigns to understand the politics of this, okay? So you've got what Eric just said. You've got the average American family that is working their tails off, right? That's participating in the workforce, full employment, that is barely making ends meet. And now you've got inflating prices, not for the things that they can put off, but for the things that they have to buy week in, week out. Right? Heat the house, gas in the car, food on the table, right? Clothes, shoes on the kids' feet for the start of the school year, and so forth. These are the things that are inflating, and the Biden administration's response to all of that is, well, you have to understand long-term inflation versus short-term inflation, and we'll just print more money. And it's like one in one ear and out the other. Two, nobody's going to, even if they had it right, which they don't, but even if they had it right, you tell me that the average American household can afford to care about Jen Psaki's explanation about long-term versus short-term inflation. They can't. This, of course, it's going to be a political issue, and it isn't going to be a political issue in the sense that, you know, operatives in one party or the other are going to talk about it in a smarter way. This is lived experience, and people are going to be white hot pissed off about it.
So, to Eric's point and your point, Rob, I'll turn to you. Is this going to sway some people's votes, right? If it's going to be a platform, as Eric said, and it impacts, just like Gentry said, our actual households.
Absolutely.
Is this going to sway someone who, let's say they voted for a straight Democrat ticket in 2019? 2020. Leading up to the midterm here in 2022, is it going to change them to actually think, you know, maybe this wasn't the right party, or maybe these individuals are not going to change what is impacting my food intake and my daily life, the struggle I have? Is this going to make a difference?
I think so. So last night I went to the caucuses, and I caucused with my Republican neighbors, and one of the fellows said, you know, my dad, who's been a lifelong conservative Democrat, is now looking and reading. He read the guy said, I showed him what we were going to talk about. He was reading the planks and the platform. Yeah, I could buy into this. I could buy into this, because it's true stuff, right? Hey, we want to protect our borders. We don't want people coming in illegally. We don't want to take stuff that we don't want to take, and it hasn't been proven really to do what everybody says it does, and no one tells us what it really does. They're simple things. It's simple, you know. I think it's going to be a landslide, to be honest with you. When they poll independents, and independents go to the right, they're in a bad world. They're in bad straits. The only thing that can help them is a war, rebellion here. I mean, I don't even know if that can help, right? Because we've seen that movie. They don't have any ideas, this party they call Democrats. They're self-serving people. They don't care about the group. They care about their individualism, because they control from the top down. And it's peasants. Peasants. They treat us as peasants because of the cerebral greatness these guys, Jen Psaki and these folks, think that they have, that no one else can. 50-cent words for $10 or 10-cent meetings, right? Yes, I think it's going to have a huge impact. I just hope that we don't screw it up when we get our turn, because we will. And then we got to do what we got to do.
You brought up caucusing last night. Brings us to our next topic, Iowa Caucus 2022. And I'm looking at the audience, because we'll be talking about this ongoing throughout the year, both leading up to the November midterms as well as post-midterm. We'll do a recap. So Iowa Caucus 2022. Gentry, let's start with you. We've got some national races impacting Iowans, right? Both in the Senate and the House. What can you tell us, just looking forward, right? We're in February. We think it's a long way out. Let me rephrase. It's not really that far out. But give us some insight as to not only who's running, but your thoughts on candidates.
Yeah, so federal races.
Federal races.
Yeah, so let's start at the top of the ticket in terms of federal races. Of course, Senator Grassley is up for re-election in 2022. He's facing a number of Democrats in that primary, most notably Abby Finkenauer, former one-term Democratic member, 30-something, no real experience other than politics. I don't know of any significant evidence that Senator Grassley won't win that one going away. I think, if you go back and look at the trust and confidence that Iowans have put in Senator Grassley, I think you have to go back into the early 80s to find an election where he got less than 60% of the vote. And in a good Republican year, I think, all evidence is that trend will continue. Yep. I think, the congressional districts are interesting. We've got, of course, 4 congressional districts in Iowa. One of those 4, the Western Iowa district, currently held by Randy Feenstra in his first term, having won in a contested primary last time around. I believe has no primary at all. If he does, it's nominal. And so that's the one district in Iowa that I think most observers would say is not competitive, really, frankly, ever outside of a primary. So that one in good shape. Then the two the two sort of eastern Iowa districts, new districts. They're numbers 1 and 2, although the numbers have changed in redistricting. So the sort of the southeastern part of the state used to be District 2, is now District 1, held by Marionette Miller Meeks, a first-term incumbent. Marionette is, of course, famous in Washington for having won by 6 votes. I think the 3rd or 4th closest congressional election in American history, despite a bipartisan review and acceptance of those results. Nancy Pelosi and Democrats in Washington, D.C. tried to overturn the results of that election. Fortunately, they failed to do so. During Marionette's first term, I think she's impressed a lot of folks. She is not only a doctor and former lieutenant colonel, surgeon, but she's also the only former public health official in the United States Congress during a pandemic recovery, and I think has been a very strong legislator there. She is running against an Iowa City liberal, a real liberal. Republicans like to call everybody liberals, and they like to call us, whatever dirty name they want to call us. Conservatives, not a dirty name, so they call us racist, but it's all BS, of course. Her opponent is a real dyed-in-the-wool liberal, right? A defund the police, AOC's not left enough kind of Iowa City liberal who does not fit that district. And so, I think on paper you would look at that first district and say that's going to be the most competitive in the state. I think the real experience there is that in a good Republican year with a good legislative track record against an out-of-touch kind of lefty liberal, that seat will.
I had my concerns about Miller Meeks when she was running. I thought she was a little, maybe too soft, maybe liberal is the word I'm looking for, but I was wrong. Yeah. This woman is strong, and she's a spitfire. She means what she means, and she stands for what she stands for. I really was very pleasantly surprised, and she's a good one.
Yeah, her story is one that I don't think a lot of Iowans really know as well as they should. She was burned badly as a young girl. Teenager, I think, 16, 17 years old, something like that, and spent months living away from home being treated. And that is the experience that drove her to decide she wanted to pursue a career in medicine. She came from a large family. Her dad, I think, was a soldier himself, not a lot of means. And so, she couldn't afford to go to school. So as a teenager, she decides, I'm going to enlist. She enlisted. She didn't go to ROTC or an academy, right? She enlisted, works her way up, and was so successful in that career that she not only earned a commission, but rose to the rank of lieutenant colonel, right? Pretty remarkable in and of itself. Started as a nurse, worked her way through nursing school, right? Then through medical school, became a doctor. Once she was a doctor, she became a surgeon. Once she was a surgeon, she ran the state medical society, and then Governor Branstad selected her to be the state's public health director. This is a woman of real grit, of work ethic that is extraordinary, and an intellect that matches. I think she was given a hard time in her primary a couple of years ago over some issues, but they proved not to be true. She's got a 100% pro-life voting record. She stood up to Nancy Pelosi on masks on the floor of that. She's tough.
It wasn't true. How many times are we saying that and seeing that in today's dramas, right? Nothing's true. But the media, the left-leaning media, takes it and pretends like it is true and people believe, but then it's not. And they're not around to say, sorry, we misled you. Why? Because it's their purpose. And, I would just wish people would wake up and say, you know what? This is what they're doing. Because it is what they're doing, because everything they do, you say, why would you do that? You would do it if you wanted to do this. That's the only reason for it. And they're bad people, and they're led by bad people, and they don't have what's good for the United States at heart at all, period. And they would sell us out, which they already have, to George Soros. And anybody that can prop up the minority and give them enough money to go get the man, right? Go get him, go kill him, tear it all down, burn it all down. Well, what are you gonna build back up? Right? What are you gonna build back up? What did Black Lives Matter burn down? Did anybody go out and help clean it up, fix it up, put bricks back in, windows back in? No. Why? Because they didn't care. They don't care. They are activists. They get propped up by people with a lot of money, and it's just enough. It's enough to get them to do whatever they want them to do, and that's what's happening. And I don't know what language you can use to make it any more simple than that, because they don't engage on ideas that work. They don't understand economics, obviously, right? They don't understand security and the border and taking care of your country. If you don't have a border, you really don't have a country. They don't care about that. You know, the list goes on and on and on. California, they don't care about getting stuff off the docks. Why? Because Newsom puts in this ridiculous emission rule on trucks. Well, when does he do that? During the pandemic. So, and I know it's tough for people to look at the whole thing, but if you look at everything and put it together, there's no other explanation that you can come up with. They want to control us forever. They tried to do it with the House bill where they're going to federalize elections, and if that happened, dude, we're never getting it back again. We're that close. Yeah. And the only thing that saved us is Trump when he beat Hillary, because imagine if he didn't. We wouldn't have had 4 years to realize this, and then we wouldn't have this contrast, which is huge. So, you know, again, our memories have to be long in this because it goes way back. They've been planning this for a long time, and it's failing because it's wrong. We're under attack. We are under siege, and we gotta, that's what it is, man.
Well, it sounds like Miller Meeks would push back, and has.
Yeah, she has.
I'm sorry.
No. And we have been under siege for a long time. You know, I mean, that's how you get to hundreds of volumes of federal regulation.
Right.
We need people that won't take that.
They can do that to the extent that we allow them to do that. So two other federal races to talk about in Iowa. The new 2nd district is the old 1st district, largely. This is Ashley Hinson's district. Also a freshman Republican member. Ashley, a strong conservative. You know, I'll say we have several of these in Iowa. Strong conservative Republican women
right.
in federal office, right? And I think we ought to be awfully proud of that. But Ashley, very much in that class. She's I think been a particularly strong voice on a number of issues in her first term, and is sitting in a district that, if I remember the numbers right, and it's been some weeks since I've looked at the new maps, but if I remember the numbers right, that district has actually gotten a little bit more favorable for a Republican. Could be competitive, but I think Ashley has conducted herself in a way, both from a policy perspective and a political perspective, that that race will likely be far less competitive than it was. The final federal race on the ballot this year in Iowa is Iowa's 3rd. That is the lone Democrat left in Iowa's federal delegation. Cindy Axne holds that seat. It's the sort of the central Iowa seat, central Iowa plus a little bit. And that is essentially a 50-50 seat. It is a very competitive seat. It is a seat where Axne came in the Democratic wave year of 2018, defeated David Young, who was the sitting Republican incumbent, got less than 50% of the vote. And had there not been, even in a Democratic wave year, had there not been a third-party candidate on the ballot, libertarian candidate on the ballot, that took more from David Young than the margin of his loss to Cindy, even in the Democratic wave year, Cindy would not have won. Same dynamic repeated itself in 2020. So David Young ran again against Cindy Axne. Axne wins, but wins in a 3-way race, not a 2-way race. Once again with a libertarian candidate taking a big chunk of Young's vote, and a big enough chunk that it was more than the margin of loss. So Axne, I think you've got to say, is in what appears to be, from any historical measurement, shaping up to be a great Republican year, Republican midterm. I think Axne is very vulnerable. There's a robust Republican primary going on there. At least 2 very strong potential candidates on the primary ballot, and maybe more. The dynamics in that race are changing a little bit. But I think the question is closer to, will we be 4-0 in the House? Will we be 3-1 in the House? But it should be a good Republican year here in Iowa.
All right. And not massage. What's that word everybody uses when they misogyny? Because we've got a governor that's a female, senator that's female, 2 congressional representatives that are female.
Yeah, and maybe a third, right? Depending on.
So all this racist, sexist stuff that they try to throw on it's not true. It's not true.
By the way, one of the leading candidates in the primary for the Republican nomination against Axne is an African American woman. Right? So you're absolutely right.
It's all lies.
It's not true.
It's all lies. But they're running out of runway because their biggest beneficiaries, CNN, they whack Zuckerberg. Their ratings are through the floor. They don't have, Zucker.
By the way, they got rid of him for mistreating women.
Yeah.
Yes. Who's doing that?
Right. Their whole setup, from Cuomo all the way down.
Yeah.
They're bad people.
We've talked about it on this program before. I think it's really important because what you've said is right, and it's a powerful dynamic. And the left calls us all kinds of names, right? We're pretty tame by comparison. We call them liberals, which happens to be the truth. They have to call conservatives really nasty names like racists and xenophobes and all of these things that are a bunch of garbage. Why?
Because they don't have anything else.
Because they don't have any ideas, and I think one of the temptations that we need to fight in this midterm is the temptation to stoop to their level. We are the people who have better ideas. The reason they have to call us those names is not because those names have anything to do with the truth. It's because their ideas are driving inflation. Their ideas are causing the border crisis. Their ideas are projecting weakness around the globe that's empowering China, empowering Russia, threatening war around the world when they were left a world at peace.
On purpose.
Okay? They're the ones who are saying, we are going to shut down dissent. We are going to shut off the First Amendment. By the way, the Second Amendment too. Right? They have no ideas. That's why they have to call us the names. I understand, having been on the front lines of a lot of campaigns, I understand the temptation to throw some names back at them, right? And I've been there. I won't say I'm always above it. But I think in the broadest sense, fundamentally, we got to remember that we are the party and the ideology of real ideas that make people's lives better. And I think if we stick to that we're going to have a much more durable majority. We're going to have a governing mandate and not just a partisan win at the polls. I think the way that we litigate this campaign is really important.
Well, and sticking to the fact that we do have ideas and keep reaffirming the fact that they call us names, racist, and all the other things. We're not. Why do you say that? They're not. Fear is their only tool. Fear, right? And that's the biggest thing we have to fear is fear itself. Well, they play on it. That's all they have.
Right.
And they try to scare us.
And they hate freedom.
And
I think freedom, I think it's a good transition to the truckers.
Amen.
The truckers in Canada, I think you're seeing, I have seen that across Iowa. I've seen Eastern Iowa go from blue to red because these are the working men and women of Iowa, of the United States. These are the ones that are building the stuff. These are the ones, fixing our houses. These are the plumbers that are coming to help us. These are all of the doers.
Right.
The folks that are really the truckers that are actually bringing our gas to the gas stations and bringing our boxes to our homes and to our grocery stores. This is really the logistics and the foundation of the country. And they are being shut down and shut up. And what we've seen is an uprising, and this is a organic grassroots uprising. This isn't Soros-funded, stuff to burn down buildings and destroy police stations. This is real. This is just real working men and women saying that they've had enough and they're trying to do it in every way, and the government is working against them. And I mean, the chapter's not over yet, but we're going to see freedom reign.
You're right.
Control. It's 100%. They got to be able to control. And how do you control people? You scare the shit out of them, right? And say, if you don't do this, you better do this because that's going to happen. Well, if you don't have anything, you lie about it and you make up lies, and then you make the lies become true. Because if we say something long enough and enough times, the lie becomes the truth. And that's what has happened. Alice in Wonderland, it's a facade. And as much as I keep on saying that over and over on this program, people need to understand it. And you got to tell them this ain't real, folks. This is not real.
So what is real?
What is real? What is real is those guys up in Canada driving their trucks.
Exactly.
That's real, right?
And what's not real is saying these truck drivers are being violent about it. There have been no burning buildings in the background where a news source said they're peacefully protesting. No, they're just driving in a convoy, showing their strength in numbers. And it is not what Trudeau said, a fringe minority. There are thousands of people showing up in support just on the side of the road and negative 20-degree temperatures up there in Canada. I know we're not Canadians, but there's a little bit of swell of pride there, isn't
Absolutely. Yeah. Because if you don't, I'm sorry.
No, they're on a mission. Yeah. And that mission,
right?
That mission is them truly saying that they've had enough.
And this is spreading.
Right.
Am I correct there? So Canada, right? Convoy going from, west to east, I think it was. And so is this happening in America? Is this going on in Europe? What are we seeing?
I think they're trying to do it here too. I haven't.
Expanding, right?
They don't put it out there. You got to go find it. The traditional media, mainstream media, they're not going to cover this stuff. We know that. So it's got to be like citizen reporters that have to do it, right? And that's what we're doing right here.
Yeah, the two terms I saw that I just read about today were from CNN yesterday. It was sedition and treasonous. Those were the two terms.
Those are the words they use for January 6th, too.
Yeah, well, that's what's being used for these truckers, and I wouldn't call it that necessarily, but...
So would they call it mostly peaceful sedition, or what's the CNN standard here?
I don't know their philosophy
100%,
but that you do bring up a good point. What's peaceful and what's not? Burning down a federal a courthouse, having for the third time in a single summer, business owners boarding up their windows only to be burned down and broken into again, versus driving a truck in support.
By the way, cognitive dissonance. Because we don't recognize what's real.
And what were businesses spray painting on those boards? What were they spray painting on those boards? They weren't spray painting MAGA. They weren't spray painting Trump. And you know why? Because Trump supporters and MAGA supporters were not the ones that were bashing those windows in and burning those buildings down, right?
Right.
They were spray painting things on those boards to try to keep the people who were doing the violence, who were burning buildings down, who were, doing real property damage. You don't see that in Canada today.
Yeah.
Why? Because they are peaceful.
A side note, our current vice president was encouraging people to bail out those folks that were burning buildings down. Just a side note to keep relevant.
And worse, not just to bail them out, but she stood in front of a camera and said it should not stop.
Right.
And what funding the GoFundMe that was going towards the truckers got shut down.
Right.
And worse than shut down, they tried to steal it.
Right.
Right? They tried to steal it.
Say it was going to other charitable donations. I think I read that.
Mm-hmm. Big tech is going to find themselves in big hurt because the latency is catching up in the tech world, meaning the speed of communication. So there's speed and there's velocity, right? Well, the velocity of what's picked up is misunderstood. It's much faster. And that's why this Rogan thing, right? Okay, Rogan may have been kicked out of Spotify before Spotify was an established entity and had capitalistic endeavors and made money and were able to throw out a number, and he says yes and takes it. And then 11 million people show up. So Spotify's people were a bunch of liberals and they protest. Well, guess what the guys that ran it said?
Well, you're jumping ahead. We're getting to that topic soon. We're going to finish up Iowa Caucus,
right.
and then we're going right down, and I'll address you with that question. But We've got some state races coming up. We're not going to dive into the candidates because we'll save that for probably the next show, maybe into specific state candidates outside maybe the governor race. But we've got House, Senate, state Supreme Court. We'll dive into those maybe a little bit later. But the question I have, Eric, I'm going to come back to you. What can conservatives and Republicans do right now, right? We're in the month of February. We've got an election coming up in November. A lot of moving pieces. To Rob's point, things are moving quickly, but we've got time. What's something that our viewers, our audience can know that, hey, this will be effective if you do right now? Maybe it might not be doing something. It might be standing for something. Give me some pillars we can stand on.
No, I think participation. What I saw in the Iowa caucuses last night, I spoke at two different caucuses down in Van Buren, far southern Iowa. What I really saw and what I saw was a lot of new people, a lot of participation. They see what's going on with the country. Mm-hmm. They feel the inflation. They see all of this and they are drawn to action. And this is their invite to the Iowa caucus last night was one of those where now they can have a voice and they can go in and express their concerns. And they did just that. Mm. And that's exactly what's great about Iowa and great about our caucus system is that we saw thousands of people across the state turn out for that last night. In the fundraisers and other things that I've been, conservative organizations I've been a part of and events that I've been at in recent weeks and months are double, triple, quadruple the size of what they used to be. And that shows me that that passion and that participation is happening, it is resonating, and that's a recipe for success.
And if I may add to that, I think, in the state Senate, for example, I think we're 2 seats away from a supermajority, mm-hmm. and reasonable chance that we can get there, that the Republicans can get there. I think, related to what Eric said, participation in the caucus to convention process. The county conventions are coming up, the district conventions are coming up. The whole platform process is important. But the other thing I would say is that beyond that, the other lesson we've learned over and over and over again in politics, this is a relationship business, right? Business is the wrong word. It belongs to all of us. And, the frustration that a lot of our viewers, I'm sure, feel, a lot of voters feel, what I want our viewers to know is you're not alone, that there are a hell of a lot of Americans out there that feel it too. And that in this process here, it isn't just election day. It's making sure that you meet these candidates, that you understand where they're at, that they hear what your issues are. And if you find a candidate that you like, that you support, the next thing you can do is you can help that candidate. And it's not just a check, and it's not just going to a meeting. The most effective way to campaign for local office is going door to door. Right? We are still a state that invites that. We're still a state that likes to know our candidates and our candidates' campaigns, that wants to make sure our voices are heard and so forth. You look at the commonality between campaigns that win legislatively, city council elections, school board elections. We just talked about this last fall. The most common technique they use isn't so much about money and television and high-end kind of things like that. It's about campaigns that do the work of putting together some volunteers and going door to door, meeting friends and neighbors, and talking about these issues, and figuring out where people that think like we do are running for office, and really getting behind them. So that's I think Eric had it exactly right. Participate, yeah. But just to make that one step more granular, I think there are real meaningful ways that every average Iowan out there who's passionate about what's going on in the country can make a real difference.
There was a guy at my caucus last night, 78 years old. He had never been to one before. He was in the service for 16 years, right out of high school, served, then went on and lived his life. And he had never been to one and said, I needed to show up. He felt like he needed to be a part of making things right, which I thought was pretty cool, right? The guy's 78 years old and he hasn't given up the fight because he's seen enough of life to know this is bullshit, right? He knows it, and he shows up and says, hey. And then they voted him to be the next county delegate, right? So this guy's gonna go. But I thought that was cool. Here's a guy, 78 years old, and he knows something ain't right. And he's a big, strong belief in the Second Amendment. He wants to support our troops. But also on the mask mandate, he said, you know, when I joined the service, you sign your life over to the military, your life. So anything they say, you got to do it because you knew that going in. Okay, well, yeah, that. So he wasn't like the guy who hadn't been around and was. He has lived. He's lived, and now he's getting involved, and so that was my experience last night.
And you know, that's one of the great things about Iowa and the Iowa process. You know, we all of us like to say they should do something about problems, right? Well, you know, in Iowa, we're they, right? You show up, you knock on some doors, you go to a couple of meetings, and like the experience you're describing, you know, the first thing they're going to ask you to do is, like, you know, step up and you know, send them on to be precinct chairman or whatever, right?
Yeah,
exactly, yes.
So I have faith in the system. I believe that people are smarter than what we're being treated as, and that there's going to be a wave, right? Again, I think just we can't screw it up. We have to remember what got us there. We have to remember to not be a part of the Republican Party, meaning there's power, there's strength in power or strength in numbers, and we can't, you know, float off and be our own guys or gals like Cheney, that gal from the January 6th committee. I mean, she's not a Republican. Why is she a Republican? Why didn't they get her out of there? Because she's not. We can't have that stuff, I don't think.
One thing that makes me feel really good too, full disclosure, I work for Save America PAC, and our fundraising numbers came out last week, and $122 million in the bank. I think that's around 30 million more than the RNC and DNC put together.
Wow.
It came from 1.5 million donors. 98.6% of them being small dollar donors. That's real, that's what we call in the fundraising world organic money. I mean, that money is coming in. We are not having big events and big house parties trying to raise millions of dollars. It's not that we're not going to do that too, because we care that much, and that's part of it. But it hasn't been yet. And that money is from Americans, from working Americans that want to see something happen. And that's what we're going to do.
I bet you I don't know, but you may know. I bet that ranges in age from, you know, young to old, from blue collar to white collar.
It covers all the demographics.
It's got all of them. I was talking to a fellow I was down to visit my dad in Florida. We were talking about Trump rallies, and the guy was describing his, he was a well-heeled fella down in Naples, and he was describing his experience when he went to this Trump rally. He's like, you know, I saw people in Benzes, I saw people in pickup trucks, I saw people in, you know, on bikes or things that they thought were just the whole menagerie of people, right? And he said it was great because you didn't feel it, but the energy that was there was real and it was palpable. I said, dude, that's the exact same experience I've had 3 times now that I've been to Trump rallies. Is that?
It's like a festival. Yeah. I mean, it's people having fun, people that care.
And
that's what it is.
And how can you give Trump a bad rap when people show up? 50,000 people in Texas.
In Texas.
He didn't make them show up.
The reality too is that we had over 30,000 people in the perimeter that had been let in with the time amount that we had let in. About 5,000 didn't get into the Des Moines rally. I was talking to my dad the next morning, and I said, you know, we had what's estimated at about 35,000 people in total there. I said, what's the biggest political event in Iowa that you remember? And I remember the night before the night before the general election in 2012, President Obama being in the East Village, estimated 15 to 20,000. I've been to several straw polls, including 1999, 2007, some really big straw polls with really big turnouts and really fantastic candidates. Still, I'd say estimate probably 20,000-ish. Maybe. So in a completely off year for a president who just lost, to be able to have the biggest event, at least in my political history.
While there was,
and I've worked for other presidents.
While there was a football game and a country music concert going on
at the same time.
Same time.
The point of this whole story is, the rallies are getting bigger, not smaller. This last Texas one, I was told, was our largest rally
50,000
ever of all. So they're getting bigger. Also, I think it means something's on the horizon.
Excellent. All right, let's talk about it. It's coming back to you, Rob. What's been in the news, there's a lot in the news, but this has been a big deal in the news. We've talked about cancel culture on previous episodes, but the powers that be, if you will, in the cancel culture circles are throwing their collective weight at Spotify and Joe Rogan. Give us a little bit of your thoughts on the reason why, and then we'll talk about a little bit about who wins this.
So the reason why is because of capitalism, because the liberals that run Spotify have never had as good a revenue generator ever than Rogan, and they're going to give every lip sync answer to keep it at bay. And Rogan ain't going nowhere, right? And if he can go anywhere, and if he gets upset, he'll go. And people will follow him, right? Because he tells the truth. If the guy had COVID, this is what he did. He took it, he got better, and they're telling him he's lying. The nerve of the people that say someone's lying when they did this to themselves and they did it, got better, why would you lie about that?
And beyond that, if I may just interject, and I'll hand it right back to you. My understanding of the episode that caused the controversy initially was that one of the initial mRNA scientists, right?
Yeah.
Maybe even a patent holder.
Right.
So this is not some like fly-by-night guy who doesn't know what he's talking about spreading, COVID misinformation. This is a scientist who is part of starting the mRNA capability that we have today, who has something to say.
Right.
And it's not just that this happened on Rogan. The very same thing happened with a United States senator, where that level of content was censored by big social media platforms, right? So this isn't about COVID misinformation. Mm-hmm. It's about control.
It's about control. And so what wins? Capitalism wins. Spotify sees that because when their employees boycotted, sorry, we're keeping him, you guys can go. At the end of the day, if you're running a business, you got to make profit. And if that's what it's about, you're never going to get rid of Joe Rogan. And they're never going to get rid of Dave Chappelle, right? Because these guys tell the truth. And when you tell the truth, people realize it for what it is, and your longevity is much greater than those who lie, as evident of what we have today. So that's my answer.
We're in agreement that Joe Rogan's going to win this, whether
Absolutely.
With or without Spotify. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Rumble offered him $100 million.
$100 million for 4 years.
Not a bad offer, I would say.
Not a bad offer.
It's like
It's such a strong offer because the people are trying to cancel him out of Spotify, right? These guys are doubling down and say, hey, we'll give you $100 million, come to us. No contract, no nothing. That shows how strong it is, not how weak it is.
So Gentry, you've alluded to this on previous episodes, so I'm going to bring this back up. We talked about cancel culture, we've maybe talked about it in a couple of different episodes, and one of the things you said is, it will eat itself, eat its own, maybe paraphrasing. Mm-hmm. Are we going to see this? Are we seeing this currently? Also in the news just this past week was Whoopi Goldberg semi-canceling through a suspension, if you will, although there are people that are calling for her job as well. Are we starting to see a little bit more of this?
I think we are. I think that, it's what I've called the Robespierre effect, right? How did the French Terror end when Robespierre's head, came off? I think, when passions like this get out of control, when the guillotine starts killing the wrong people, that's when we seem to come back to our senses historically. And it's sort of been my hypothesis that that's how this will end. The Rogan story has become a bigger story. You know, the Whoopi Goldberg story is really extraordinary in its own right. You know, she said what she said. It was, you know, giving her the benefit of the doubt. It was inartful, but you know, I mean, we've said this before. Let's hold to a conservative standard and not just revel in the other side's losses. She came out and she apologized, right?
Oh, I didn't hear that.
She came out and apologized. Let's have some grace. If we say we're not for cancel culture, I've never watched The View. I'm never going to watch The View. If you don't like Whoopi Goldberg, turn the channel. But to call for her head, call for, you know, her firing, to call for a boycott of the channel, we say we oppose that, right? And so now we've got somebody who, you know, skewers conservatives and whatever, and now it's kind of delicious that she's caught up in it, right? That's the wrong way to look at it. The woman said something she shouldn't have said. She said it a way she shouldn't have said it, okay?
She
apologized. She apologized. And I think, you know, look, I mean, I've said this on the show before as well. I'm here as a conservative, but in my own life, I try to be a Christian first and a conservative second. You know, you pray the Lord's Prayer every day, and I believe prayers are answered. And when I pray the Lord's Prayer, you know, a big important part of it is, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Right? You believe prayers are answered, you pray that one, then like, let's live that out a little bit. The woman apologized. Let it go.
You know, I didn't hear the apology, but what I did hear.
A lot of folks are calling it a faux apology.
Well, probably that's it.
But my point is, that may be true. Okay, I'm sympathetic, but my point is, like, I don't think that's a business we want to be in.
No,
we want to have
absolutely.
cancel culture. Then let's
let her come on and say it again, because the more she says stupid things, the better. But what I find so interesting, that is her critical race theory, right? She is trying to reinvent what the meaning of the Holocaust was, that it wasn't against the Jewish people, it was against humanity. And she's blurring a line there, because it's misrepresentative, or in its untruth and its unfactual. She may believe it personally, but that's not how it happened. It wasn't against, we've all read the books. We saw the Nuremberg trials. This wasn't about against humanity. It was against a certain religious group of people. Bottom line, and to try to change that and use different language to be, I don't know, all-encompassing of the humanity, is just kind of, it's what it was, right? That's what I think.
But I guess Gentry will be the adults in the room.
Well, look, I'm not.
He's right.
I mean, I'm vengeful because I'm
not justifying
angry, but
no, I know you're not. I agree with you. I agree with you.
Right.
I agree with him.
You bring up a point that's hard for some people to swallow, but you're exactly right in that we need to be, the phrase is the bigger man. I'm not being chauvinistic, it could be man, woman,
right?
But to be the bigger person, right? And accept the apology and move on. I agree with you.
And to have the integrity to believe what we say we believe. You know, if cancel culture is wrong, and we say it is, I mean, one of the things that's led to American greatness is freedom of speech, free expression of ideas, free enterprise, broadly speaking. You know, people have to have the freedom to be wrong.
Right.
You have to be free to fail.
Absolutely.
We learn from our mistakes. I hope we learn from our mistakes.
And so, you know, look, I despise what she said, okay? And as I said, I've never watched The View, never will watch The View, encourage people to change the channels. But if we say we don't want cancel culture, and we shouldn't want cancel culture, then let's not contribute to it.
I don't think we cancel her at all, because she's going to step in it again, because really she believes that, right? And so anyway she couches it, let her talk, right? And what's so funny isn't Joe Behar, I mean, she's been her sidekick forever, and watching, she's getting a little nervous there, as well she should, because they spill lies.
Well, I'm gonna wish our viewers a happy Valentine's Day, and in the spirit of Valentine's Day, I jotted down a few notes, but I want to hear it from our distinguished panelists. Give us some things that you love, right? Love is in the air with Valentine's. Give us some things you love about Iowa, and it could be things that I haven't jotted down. You know, we've got a lot of freedoms that some other states don't have. But Gentry, let's start with you. We'll just kind of go down the row. Give us something you love about Iowa, whether it's freedom, political things, whatever it might be, but give us something you love about Iowa, being an Iowa.
I'll tell you something I love about Iowa is the accessibility, the process that we have here. You know, and I'll pick on the caucuses because we just had them. But I think it's not just the caucuses, right? I think we have in Iowa, we have a tradition of good open government. And, we say sunshine is the best disinfectant. And I think Iowa lives that in a way that a lot of other states don't. We don't always get it right. We're not always perfect. But I think the Iowa caucuses are a great embodiment of that. Rob, you talked earlier in the show about the problems with a top-down approach where, a far distant elite, control our lives, try to control our lives, and when they get it wrong, they don't fess up. They say, shut up and do what I said you have to do, right? The antithesis of that, the absolute 180-degree opposite of that, is what we do every 2 years at the Iowa caucuses, right? The national press covers it every 4, but we do it every 2 years. Any Iowan who's registered to vote can walk into their local precinct caucus and they can participate, right? They can sign up, they can say, this is what I think ought to be in the party platform, this is who I think we ought to support, this is who I think we ought to, put on the ballot in a primary, this is who I think we shouldn't put on the ballot in a primary. Anybody gets to say. You don't have to be a donor, it's free of cost, there's no requirement, you don't have to know somebody, you don't have to, there's absolutely no requirement other than you're a registered voter and you show up. Right? And the experience that a lot of people had at Iowa caucuses last night, and we've talked about some of them here today, and it's typical over my 25 years doing this now, is that some of the first timers that walk in are asked, invited, sometimes even begged, go on. Right? Like, we'll make you the precinct chair. Go to the county convention and not just your local caucus. Go to the congressional district convention and not just the county convention. Right? You want to be on the platform committee? Come on in. Right? That's the Iowa process. It is a bottom-up process that is it is the antidote to a top-down political and artificial elite. We do it better in Iowa than anywhere else in the country.
Very inclusive.
And I love it.
Right.
That's what I love about Iowa politics.
All right. Eric, give us some things you love.
Well, I'll tell you a little story. So to keep with the caucus theme and the love, I'm driving with a friend down to Van Buren County last night to speak on a friend's behalf who's facing a primary down there. And I've been to Van Buren County many times for various different campaigns, but we're driving in a pickup truck on the way down. And there's an area that kind of curves on I think it's 163. And you can see forever, and the sun's coming down, and it's orange, it's blue, it's green, it's pink, it's purple, it's everything. And I swear, like the sun is shining a beam right on me. I mean, it felt like God, looking at God. That's what it felt like. And you know what? It was Iowa. And it was heading down, and it's just noticing those things and being a part of a very inclusive and a very welcoming, as Gentry was saying, caucus experience where people wanted to talk to me. They wanted to talk about their challenges. They want to talk about inflation. They wanted to talk about what's going on at the Capitol. And so this is truly a republic, a democracy happening, right in front on a local level, and being a part of it, and experiencing that drive and all. Just let me know how thankful I am to live in Iowa, to be a part of this process, and certainly work hard for freedom and for our candidates. We're lucky that we live in a country where we can do that.
All right, Rob.
Well, my story will kind of be the same. So I lived in Chicago for 18 years, moved in 2000, came back 2018. And I will never forget, every time I came home, went over the Mississippi River, and you come on Davenport, and you come around the bend, it says, welcome to Iowa. And the roads get bigger. I mean, it's coming over a bluff. You see this beautiful green that flows, and then the harvest, you see this beautiful brown. It's like I'm blessed. I'm so thankful that I lived somewhere else where I did and learned what I learned and saw what I saw, and then to be able to come back home. And home is where your heart is. So that's my story. It's kind of like yours. Every time you go over that bridge, I felt good.
Excellent. I've been an Iowan for 2 years. I don't have a story to accompany it, and I won't mention the state we moved from, but we moved from a Democrat-led state, and give you a hint, it's a supermajority Democrat-led state. I'm thankful for the freedoms that Iowans get, and it's when you live here. If you grew up here, you may not know that. You hear it, you can read about it, but if you lived in some of the neighboring states or maybe some coastal states, and then you come to Iowa, you see it firsthand, and it can take your breath away. I'm very thankful, in the spirit of Valentine's. I love the freedoms and the common sense that isn't so common across the country, but the common sense that Iowans have, from the government all the way down to our neighbors. So they call it Iowa nice for a reason, and common sense accompanies that. So in any case, that's my Valentine's Day tribute. Like we do in every show, every episode, we're going to leave the closing remarks to our panel. Rob, we're going to come right back to you. We're going to start with you. Closing remarks.
Closing remarks, as I always close, be prepared, witness it yourself, and then stand up and do what's right, because we're under attack. You got to search it out. You'll find it. But the enemy is at the gate.
All right. Eric.
My final thoughts, let's get to work. Let's participate. That's what it's going to take for us to be successful, for a conservative movement to push all of these policies that we were talking about and that we're all very concerned about today. These ones are really affecting my family's budget, my family's pocketbook, like what decisions we're going to make for this year. We haven't had to make these kind of decisions really in the last several years, and it's tighter and it's not as easy. I certainly blame the current administration. I didn't feel this prior to, so I'm calling them out, and I'm going to work as hard as I can to make sure they are not at all successful this fall, and that I do everything that I possibly can individually to make that happen.
All right. Gentry.
My thoughts would be related, I think, to both of yours. It's time for action, right? It's been well over a year since the last election. We're now past the Iowa caucuses. We're well into platform season and primary season. The legislature is meeting, second session of this General Assembly. I think for the third time in 5 years, we'll have transformative tax relief in Iowa. That's a process that will be ongoing. We've got a legislative majority that should grow with the assistance of conservative voters around the state, that is committed to the idea that parents ought to have the primary voice in their children's education. And we have an opportunity now to go get involved in a meaningful way. We've been licking our wounds since a loss, more than a year ago. The election season is upon us, right? And it is time for us to go get engaged. It was fine to be licking our wounds for a while, to be angry for a while. It's time to go to work. I think we've got a great election season ahead of us. But that's all theoretical until people knock on doors and put up yard signs and go to these events. And by the way, hold their legislators' feet to the fire, right? We're not just about winning elections, we're about better policy too. And so we're in the midst of that now. It's go time, as they say.
Roger that.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, as always, for joining. Great show. And thank you for joining us at Conservative Voices Talking Points. We'll see you next time.